Thank you, Griff. For more on this, we're going to bring in our political panel. With us today is Republican strategist Joe Pinion and Democratic strategist Harley Lippman. Thank you both for being here today. Harley, I'm going to begin with you, but first I want to play a little bit more of what the Pennsylvania governor had to say.
I do feel strongly that President Biden got it absolutely wrong. This was not only a black eye on the community, the Kids for Cash scandal, but it also affected families in really deep and profound and sad ways.
So, Harley, we heard in Alex's reporting there that this had to do with people who were at home serving their sentences during COVID. There were 1,500 of these. But this case should have been paid a little more attention to?
Yes, probably. But at the same time, I'm a believer in forgiveness, compassion, second chances. So I have a little bit of sympathy in this one.
Joe, your response on that?
I'm stunned. I believe that the only thing that you have in this world that should be sacrosanct is childhood innocence. The notion that you are not defined by the worst things you've ever done, and you are not limited by those parameters as well. And so these children had their futures stolen. They had their innocence stolen by a man who claimed to be Scranton Joe. He should have known that this blight on the justice system that happened in his own backyard was not something that should have been dealt with kid gloves when the man at the center of this was stealing the future of our children. And so I think it is par for the course for a man that wildly told the American people that it was Republicans that were going to put y'all back in chains to black people. And now here we have a man being given clemency when he quite literally put children who didn't deserve it back into bondage. So it's crazy to me.
There was a 17-year-old boy who is convicted on a very minor drug charge who did ultimately commit suicide, did not get a second chance. But let's move on to the presidential pardons here, because we have new Fox polling out on this, asking Americans about how they felt, one, about Biden's pardon for his son Hunter, 63% disapproving. But Joe, I also want to take a look at the pardon that Trump has promised for those convicted for January 6th. 62% of Americans disapprove of that idea. Should the president-elect rethink this?
I think there has to be a level of discernment for individuals who did not enter the Capitol, individuals who's had their entire lives destroyed simply by being outside the building or having their cell phone ping a tower in the surrounding area. So yes, there are certainly people who deserve to be given a second chance, who have been vilified and branded as insurrectionists, a scarlet letter from which they shall never recover. So I do believe the president has a responsibility. In fact, I do believe that it is part of the mandate that has been given. Not all people on January 6th are created equal, and I believe the president and the people around him recognize that fact.
Harley, a response on that?
Yeah, I think the problem with the president's pardon of his son is that he said he would not do that. Truthfulness and credibility is everything. And when you say you're going to do something or not do something, you need to keep your word. That's a serious problem. On the other hand, he's a father, and anyone who has a child could understand how a father would want to pardon his son, who otherwise may end up in jail for the rest of his life.
Now, you know, Republicans, as you know, Joe, are dealing with their own challenges right now on the Hill. You have these Trump nominees who have also received some pushback from fellow Republicans who are also getting blowback from some MAGA Republicans themselves. And you had Republican Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina talk about that. Take a listen.
They may be making a long-term mistake if they're not careful. Once you've attacked somebody and they vote no, it's very easy for them to vote no for the remainder of a Congress. So that should be kept in mind.
Joe, the message there from the senators, be careful here.
Look, first and foremost, we should not be giving a quarter to members of the Senate threatening the president-elect with no votes to undermine an agenda that the entire country just voted to bring into fruition. So, yes, we can have honest conversations about the nominees, but the president was elected. He won all the 7 swing states. The American people have placed their trust in his hands. He has the right to nominate who he sees fit to put that agenda in place. And I don't believe we can talk about it being vengeance or President Trump's revenge. There will be an era of accountability that will begin on the 20th of January when we begin to hold the people accountable who have undermined our rights, our liberties, and effectively the people's governance.
Now, Harley, I want to take a quick look. I don't have much time left at the economy, because in our Fox News polling, you can take a look for yourself how Americans feel about the economic conditions, the nation as a whole. Only 23% feel positive and 77% feel negative. Yet the president is saying he's leaving, while not perfect, an economy that's still the strongest in the world. But Americans don't feel that way.
No, this is a failure of the Biden administration. He has the lowest exit polls of any president since President Jimmy Carter. And that's for obvious reasons. Anybody who went shopping in the grocery store in the last few years saw prices going ridiculously high. Inflation, that really took a toll. And then also you look at the border, 8 million people have entered the United States since President Biden became president. Of that, 60% entered illegally. So between inflation and a bad economy and between the border being out of control, this was all manageable and this was all fixable, but the Biden administration didn't do their job, just being very candid about it. And the consequences are an election with a Republican president. The Democrats got what they deserved.
And I am out of time, but I want to thank you, Harley Lippman, Joe Pinion. Thank you so much, both, for your time.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.